Well, it's interesting to be asked that at a college because I feel like in my lifetime I've come to understand that a lot of people waste their time in college. I think college is amazing in a lot of ways. It certainly served me very well, but it's part of a conundrum in which the trades or physical work or working with one's hands has been degraded over the decades since the Industrial Revolution. And so that's my first piece of advice is make sure you should be in college, because if you want to be a baker or a candlestick maker, you don't need college. And some of the woodworkers I've met, or luthiers or cobblers, never had a lick of college, but they're the smartest people I've come across. Farmers have an incredible intelligence that has nothing to do with Wall Street or economics or so-called climate change, which jury's still out on that, right?
Yeah.
They're talking to Puerto Rico, apparently, to see if they've had any recent changes in climate. But so that I'd ask yourself if you should be in college. If so, are you wasting your time? Are you getting something done that's going to help? Are you doing something that you love that will help you make money for yourself and your loved ones? And I would also say to cling to what's weird about you. That's always served me very well. That's all we have as human beings. Like, if we all try and achieve some sort of homogeneous platonic ideal of student or banker or prostitute, there are obviously like high watermarks in all of those fields, but only by figuring out what's weird about you. Maybe you have a funny tooth shape that makes you a specialist prostitute. You can bring a sensation to your work that no one else has. So find your own specific weird toothy blowjob and go to town. Well, that's kind of what I figured out backwards. Is I just had this feeling of that I really wanted to entertain people, which is weird coming from this small town of salt of the earth public servants. That wasn't something one did, with their life. And I was like, well, I think people do it though. Like, and I've heard of people getting paid to memorize dialogue and then repeat it for an audience. Like, that's a thing people do. And once I got into it and was like, oh, I was right. I love this, and it doesn't seem like work. And to this day, I've been lucky enough to get paid for it for a long time, and quite frequently, my coworkers and I say we're so lucky because I pay to be here. This is so fun. And so it's quite simple. When I speak at colleges, I usually say, figure out what you love to do, and then figure out how to get paid to do it. And a lot of people then immediately try to get jobs masturbating when I offer that advice. And those jobs are available, but they're hard to come by. And that is, if you slow that down, that's a pretty funny thing to say. Tips for a good life. Determine as fulsome a definition as you can of recompense. Usually has a lot less to do with money and a lot more to do with hugs. But that I've been very lucky. I've made a bunch of bread, a lot more than I ever thought I would as a theater major. But once I did, I quickly realized I wasn't any happier. In fact, I was more stressed. Like, oh great, now I have to learn about interest rates and crap like that. But I come from a family where we take care of each other, we take care of our domicile, and we all cook together, and we have fun together, and that feels like a lot better pay than any paycheck I've ever gotten. Well, swallow your ego. That's, any problem I've had getting kissed in my life, it's usually because of an ego problem where I think, this person is not, or this dog won't pay any attention to me at all. or these farm animals, or sometimes it's been, I've pursued humans in love, and pretty much settled on that. But it's, when I have disagreements with my wife, the easiest way to solve them is to take a deep breath and say, you know what, we're both right, or we're both wrong, or it doesn't really matter, but I'll say I'm sorry. I'm sorry I got upset. Can we please start kissing again? That's my advice.
Perfect.
Also do jigsaw puzzles together. That leads to a happy bedroom. Great question. Rose for sure. It's the typewriter. And once I start, I rarely stop. I chug down the entire ear. And I'm talking Illinois corn, puny Indiana crap. The secret to my facial hair is I don't shave. I wash it with soap. And when my beard grows fulsome, I keep a little oil around in case I run into trouble with the comb. But I generally don't do anything to it. Well, it's pretty traceable in hindsight. I grew up in a farm family and learned to use tools of all sorts from my dad, my uncles, and my grandfathers. And by the time I was a teenager, I was framing houses. I was working on a blacktop crew in the summers to pay for stuff. But my family, we built a couple barns, fences, decks, porches. So I was good at swinging a hammer when I started theater school. I quickly learned that I could make money building scenery while trying to become an actor. And I did that successfully. I went to Chicago, and while I was learning to work on stage as an actor, I was working as a professional theater carpenter. And I had my own shop by the time I left Chicago in my late 20s. And so I was skilled at working in a shop with tools. Then when I got to Los Angeles, I couldn't find the same theater work. So I started building, I sort of fell back on decks, and I was building cabins in people's yards, just kind of backyard follies. And it was then, there are some great craftsmen bungalows and houses in Southern California, particularly built by these brothers named Green and Green, that are just crazy works of art, where the joinery of the timber framing of the building was the decoration, and they had some Asian influences. So there were these craftsman lodges that had a touch of like a Japanese temple to it. They're just immaculate. There's a few that are still maintained like museums. So I had seen these, been very inspired by them, and I'm building these cabins, and I said, oh, I'm going to do some timber framing and be inspired by Green and Green. And it was then the joinery in timber framing is the same joinery, just larger, that you find in heirloom furniture. So I was making these huge mortise and tenon joints. It's a way of fastening wood together with no nails or screws, making large puzzle pieces out of wood. And it just hit me one day, I think I was 28, and I said, oh, if I shrink this down, I could make a beautiful, fine woodworking table. And I was just besotted from that moment to this. I was like, I can make beautiful things out of wood. And so I rented a shop and just started learning, and I haven't stopped. I'm just learning as much as I can. So I'm working on a batch of ukuleles right now, on my way towards making some guitars. And if I succeed in that, I'll probably maybe make a couple more boats. Boats are really fun. Maybe a mandolin. Who knows? Well, anywhere you get a bunch of people together, somebody's going to put on a show at some point. And so my high school was very small. My town was very small, but we did plays and musicals. We did a play in the fall and a musical in the spring, I think, or vice versa. It's been a while. And so I was in the band, I was in the chorus in junior high, I was in the swing choir. I had a penchant for it. I was an altar boy in the Catholic Church, and I used to get laughs during Mass until my dad explained to me that was not the time nor the place to get laughs. And so I don't know, I had this itch to entertain people, and so it took me a while to come around to figure out how to use what I'd been given to be very successful at entertaining people, which is why I'm glad I was able to build scenery for a living, because it took me into my mid-20s to kind of comprehend how to use the tools I'd been given, to realize that I was not Tom Cruise. And instead I was some strange human all on my own, and that was my greatest value. And so then building that is what I think allowed me to get some work. But I mean, my family's very funny. We'd go fishing. We had a cabin deep in the woods in Minnesota, and as kids in this broke-ass little cabin, there was an 8mm camera, and then there was a video camera, and so we'd make movies, and they were terrible, dumb family kids screwing around movies, but I think that exists everywhere, and I would occasionally get to the bigger towns to see shows for one reason or another, or I'd go to Chicago. I remember going to a couple different colleges for school trips to see plays, and just having it really excite me and think I'd like to try that.